Welcome to another edition of the Manifest panel discussion. Today we have with us Nupur Gurbaxani, which I got the name right, and Aditi Roy. Nupur is the Director of Brand and Innovations at Sanofi Consumer Health, and Aditi is the Head of External Engagement at Novartis India Business. Very exciting to have them. Between the two of them, they've worked a lot in pharma marketing, but they've also spent years and years in affiliate sectors, so it's going to be a fun conversation. Nupur, we'll start with you. You've worked in consumer, you've worked in consumer health and in pharma marketing. How are these different? Just compare and contrast for us.
A very exciting question, Praful, and thanks to you and Manifest for setting this exciting conversation up. I think the fundamentals of marketing across industries, whether it's pure play FMCG or it's pure play pharma or a hybrid of both, remain the same, right? We all are here to solve that, first uncover the unsaid conflict in the lives of our consumers and adults we serve, and then find a way to profitably cater to that need, right? So those fundamentals remain absolutely the same. I think to me, the pharma marketing or healthcare marketing would slightly be a notch above than consumer on one aspect, that it requires far more stronger brand building. And one of the analogies I can give is, you don't go Google searching on a painkiller when you are in pain. You actually go for the brand that you've trusted, the brand that's been reliable, the brand that solved your problem for years, right? And that's eventually what all of us have striven to do from the day we took up this profession, right? So in pharmaceutical marketing or in healthcare marketing, as we see, I think we create far more stronger brands. We are far more invested in building brands. And I think that whole authenticity and the honesty with which we show up, with which what we say to our consumers and deliver is far more stronger, and I think there are some lessons to be learned on both sides from that.
I especially love the very first line you said, which is cover the uncovered needs of consumers. Very often in marketing, we're just forgetting about that. We're looking at it as communication, we're looking at it as gimmicks, and just at the heart of it is that covering the uncovered need. Spoken like a true blue marketing person. Exactly. And so Aditi, tell me, what I find most interesting about your role is, as a comms team, you're working very closely with the brand teams and building and launching some of the biggest brands in the industry right now. So tell us more about how that is, what the challenges are, how do you make the most of it?
So, Praful, actually, if you look at the market that we are in, pharma, and especially at Novartis, because most of our medicines are prescription medicine, and in India, direct-to-consumer marketing is not something that one can do. We believe that all the teams need to work together. We can't be in silos, and therefore, what we first look at is what is it that we can change for the patient, who is at the center, right? Patients and caregivers. So while doctors are one of the medium that we really look at reaching out to first, and we have an ecosystem conditioning that is done with the doctors, but it's very, very important to understand what is it that the patients need. So unraveling that insight, building trust in areas where access and awareness is still, I believe, barriers. I think that's what we come forth with, and comms remains, it's not post facto that we come into the play. I think what is beautiful now over the years, that we've become front and center, very closely knit with the brand team, medical, so many other functions, and we co-create the strategy.
Absolutely. And at the same time, I can imagine several areas of conflict that also happen. How do you kind of navigate that?
Certainly, I think, so in the last 20 years, 13 have been dedicated to healthcare for me. And when we started out, it used to be that turf war was quite evident. Nupur and I actually were colleagues back then. And it was always like, marketing will own this. And then why is communication getting into this? And what we realized over the years is that while the marketing team, which was very close to the ground, right, they would know the patient's journey from the HCP lens. But what the patient communication or communication team brought in was the journey in the patient lens. So real stories from the patients, and then just that sharp insight that needs that change when the patients start understanding science. So it was actually humanizing science. And I think over the years, the organizational structure is such that the cross-functional teams have started coming together, and they've realized that, all of us need to work together. It's not like one is passing the baton to the other. It's more like, let's work together and build something.
I love that you say that, because a lot of the pharma marketing folks focus on their customer, which is the doctor. And when you also have this patient lens to it, it just changes the conversation 9 times out of 10, and which is why some of the briefs I've got from your team are the most fun briefs to work with.
Thank you.
So Nupur, this is a question I've been meaning to ask you for a very long time, and now I've got you on the hot seat. So pharma marketing, compared to all the other marketings you've done, does it need more strategy or does it need less strategy?
No, so I think, a lot of us as marketers end up confusing our roles as creating good comms, whether for HCP and all. But I think at the heart of great marketers are people who have a strategic insight, I think, right? So just building on what Aditi said, right, that the role of strategy in pharma, according to me, is a little bit more intense than FMCG from 2 fronts, okay? And one is exactly what Aditi touched upon, right? As a marketer, you often run the risk of seeing your marketing strategy or marketing plan from the lens of HCP. You run the risk of missing the insight or the job to be done from a patient or the end consumer or the end human being lens, right? So you got to actually don both hats, because as marketer, we get obsessed with our consumer, and in pharma there's a risk that you may end up confusing HCP as your only consumer or your customer, right? He is or she is, but it's equally important to understand what he is serving or what does he need to solve the problem of his end customer, which is the patient in this case. I think the second thing is, unlike FMCG, at least in India, pharma industry is still sort of inadequate when it comes to data. In FMCG today, we can track retail offtakes through Nielsen, through Pizom, the e-com, right? You have a pin code mapping of your offtake and your intervention. I think pharma, even today, we're struggling with data, right? And therefore, the role of a marketer or the capability required would be slightly more intense, because you should be able to read data from multiple inadequate sources, triangulate it, and yet build your insights. So I would say it's slightly more intense and demanding, but very fulfilling.
I love that you say that, because a lot of folks in pharma marketing say, hey, we're in pharma, and especially in India, we're in a branded generic market, and therefore what's the role of marketing, what's the role of marketing strategy? And it actually becomes more intense, because you're triangulating multiple needs, multiple insights, you're working with multiple stakeholders, and it's actually more challenging. Any examples that either of the two of you have on the space would be great for the folks out there too.
I think one beautiful case study that I've personally witnessed and been a part of is when we launched globally a heart failure drug. Heart failure was absolutely confused as an aftermath of heart attack, and that was consistent not just with patients but even with doctors, which was quite strange, because doctors are the specialists, but I think somewhere there was a play of nomenclature, right? And we knew that we cannot modify the lexicon, because globally the heart failure term was built, so you couldn't have changed that term and brought in something new in India. So of course a lot of this fragmented data came into play. We did multiple market researches, put everything together. What we realized is that we need a very local, and when I say local, hyper local in terms of geographies within the country also, where we break down symptoms of heart failure and truly educate patients to ask the right questions to the doctors and equip the doctors to answer these questions. So I think, and we could not have done this alone. So honestly, the key was there that we worked with patient organizations. We brought in partnerships. I think that's when this whole sustainable partnership, working with other stakeholders from the ecosystem, and of course a lot of, because the best talents sometimes are at the agencies. So we pulled in the might of agencies actually, who sometimes know more better. They know what kind of campaigns will run better, and they have this beautiful knack of simplifying messages. We complicate it. Because we are living and breathing insights day in and day out, I think we overthink, we tend to complicate, and that's where we leverage this whole speciality of partners to simplify message, and I think that just worked beautifully for us.
Which brings me to the next question, and I see this at Novartis, where a lot of global comms are being localized in India, or the comms are very different. And in pharma marketing, if you're working with an MNC pharma, that's the biggest challenge, where they're very often saying that use what we have at a global level. And India is a few markets that, has that conflict where we want to localize and often need to localize. So how do you decide when is the right time to localize, at the brand level? How do you see a brand and know that we need to localize or go global? Sorry.
I hope I don't ruffle any feathers here. But a lot of times global campaigns are done and designed with the right intent, and there's a lot of market research that goes in. But unfortunately, it's at the developed markets or the markets that are revenue earners, right? Unfortunately, India is a volume game. We are not really in the value game. We are trying to up that. And therefore, I think the first thing that we do is we don't get into the conflict zone of telling our global team, listen, this does not work. So what we agree is that the science that you are building in and the strategy is on point, but we'll need to nuance it with local flavor. 3 things that have worked is bring in a patient group, test the key messages with the patient community, give that pilot insight back to the global team, and post that A/B testing, have like a pilot launch with your own local measurement framework. Show the early initial results, and icing on the cake that has worked for us for this campaign for ankylosing spondylitis was that we were able to scale it to neighboring countries. So you don't have like a dedicated marketing and comms team in a Pakistan or a Bangladesh or a Nepal, but you could just give that content, translate it in their local language, and they've run with it. So these are the 3 things that honestly have worked.
No, very sharply said, and the global folks just believe in data. So if you use the data to make your points and nothing like that. Have you also faced those challenges?
I think so. I think I'll just build on what Aditi said, and going back to our conversation earlier, I think as much as we are global versus local, we are also about solving human problems, right? About humanizing it, right? And in my career, as much as there can be a differences or a stance one can take, oh, this works in US, this doesn't work in India, I think somewhere as marketeers, and especially local marketing teams, also owe it to themselves to first deep dive into saying, okay, what's the human problem that's been solved? And more often than not, Praful, you'll realize, much to displeasure of our ego, that the human problem we all are trying to solve remains the same in US versus Brazil versus India, right? If today, to give an example, if you are trying to get in something that helps people cure their vitamin D levels, there could be more outdoorsy lifestyle in US and there could be a less outdoorsy style in India, but the reality is that when we suffer from vitamin D, as humans we go through the same set of problems, right? So I think first let's distill that problem down to the common denominator that we have, and as long as that insight, the problem, the solution is the same, the packaging of it can be done beautifully and can be adapted. And more often than not, I think, at least in my interactions with the global team, as long as we agree on translating the same insight into a solution. I have never come across a bunch of people who've said, oh, don't use red or don't use this, right? I mean, and do what you want. So I think that's where, and the onus is on local teams. The onus is on local teams, exactly to what Aditi said. Do your groundwork, test the inside out, let the consumer or the patient or whosoever we're serving guide us in this journey. Use data to facilitate your conversations rather than, saying, oh, this is what we want, oh, this doesn't work in our country. Work on the common denominator and the solution is there. But obviously, if you are being lazy yourself and not doing your groundwork, then it goes into a tailspin of.
I want to add an example here also, because Nupur actually touched on a beautiful piece of the adapt part, right? How do you make it relevant? So in 2017, I believe, psoriasis, do you remember? There was this campaign globally. The insight was that they are destigmatizing psoriasis, it's not contagious, and therefore the whole campaign was around, first, there was a lot of intimacy in the campaign. The attire chosen was things that are very normal for the Westerners but not so normal in India, and it spoke about just kiss your HCP, kiss whoever you are meeting. So it was actually, if you look at the emotion there, it was the fact that you can touch and you can hug and you can embrace and you can be the same way with a psoriasis patient, the way you are with anybody else in your life. But just bringing that and dumping it on the Indian consumer would have been a disaster, and we recognize that, right? So we kept that inside, but we called that entire campaign as Unhide Psoriasis. And we obviously used a more Indian sensitivity, soothing apparel, etc., so on and so forth. So we did have to reshoot, but global teams understood.
And the big message, I think, from both of you is also keep your ego aside.
Absolutely.
And let the starting point be the global comms and what it's saying and the insight it addresses. And only then, if for whatever reason that's not working, then consider. And there's enough teams that are trigger happy in terms of wanting to change right at the outset. When you're working in consumer healthcare, you need teams that understand HCP marketing, teams that understand consumer marketing. How do you build such teams?
So tricky, to be very honest, right? Because a lot of us, and unfortunately, when we start our careers, a lot of us really come with those blinkers on, saying, I only want to do FMCG, or I only want to do pharma, or I only want to do, auto. So I think that's, to me, that's the tricky part, because a lot of us come with presumptions about it. So it's always sort of a selling that I have to do internally to my own teams on what's in store for us. But I think, again, the whole, at least the FMCG space where I've spent most of my time, I personally feel, sort of rotational roles have really helped. So we kind of insist on our teams who are, working in, let's say, the expert marketing side, which is the HCP marketing side, actually move to spend a year at least in the pure play consumer marketing side, and vice versa. And this has really helped us, build it. I think the other thing that we've started doing is that when we do brand briefing, or when we develop comms for keeping in mind both sides of it, right? So the brand inside, the brand promise does not change between HCP marketing material to consumer marketing material, because at the end of the day, the brand does the same job. Obviously, the HCP materials talk more science. Borrowing from Aditi's word, the consumer one humanizes it, simplifies it, says, right? But at the end of the day, it's commonality, right? So obviously, it is this hybrid exposure that gets the team going. I think I've been, also fortunate to have you guys around. The industry is now buzzing with, you bringing in so much fun and excitement. So agencies, you've kind of built up the game of agencies. Overall, it's become easier over the years. The challenge still remains in getting first people to accept it, but once they accept it actually offers them far more richer experiences than it is, right? The other good thing that's happened in industry also is a lot of FMCG brands are now looking at expert marketing, right? If you really break it down today, all the work that you're doing with influencers, all the work you're doing, let's say today a L'Oreal is doing in the salon space, all the work today most of the hair color companies are doing, they're also moving towards expert marketing, right? So fundamentals remain the same. So it's not really that difficult today. Seldom can you sell a brand by just getting a celeb on your ad. You really need to get the whole gamut of influencers to go talking about it. So it's becoming easier with the day.
And this is then a follow-up question for both of you. When you're working with very diverse teams, there's goods and bads in terms of pulling the diversity together. Yeah. What's the role that you all play in that? How do you balance that piece? And I see each of you do it in different ways in your organizations.
Generational diversity is something that may not always be easy to maneuver. I don't know what your experience has been, and sometimes because it challenges your experience and the whole ego piece that oh, I come with 20 years of experience and therefore this belief system was right. But somebody who may have 5 years of experience, is digital naive, is eating data and consuming data in a very different manner, is understanding insights in a very, the appetite of the senior person, so to say, which is not, we are in flat organizations actually, has to be to really kill your ego and see the merit in that generation and the value of what is being brought on the table. So I think that is one big piece that I personally feel is important. The other piece is that ideal teams are where nobody clones each other, and I'm stealing this from my manager because the way she has built her team over the last, and I've been a part of her ecosystem for the last 10 years, and I've seen that she's always brought in people from diverse skill sets who are way better, in her terms, way better than her. And I've seen that working for us as a team, because we are able to bring to the table a full armory of things instead of clones of the same speciality, right? So I think that really works.
So I think, for me it's simple. More diverse the teams are, the better it is. I think when I look at my teams, I consciously choose diversity and stuff. I think I have only one thumb rule or one elimination criteria when I choose my team, and wherever I can have an influence is no ego. I think ego is something that I would not accept in my team, because as long as we don't have that, whether it's age, whether it's gender orientation, whether it's which background do we come from, just doesn't matter. It only adds value, right? And I think in pharmaceutical marketing, healthcare marketing especially, and I still remember Mayur, my boss at Novartis, who was an out-and-out Nestle guy, when he recruited me into Novartis and gave me this biologic to sell. I was like, what's wrong with you, Mayur? I was like, how could you do this to me, right? I mean, we trusted each other. And there I am, and I didn't understand what T cells are, and I had to read a book on organ transplantation in my holiday to come up to speed with those basic terms. And I think that whole throwing me off in the sea and putting me in a complete discomfort. And he actually, after months of fighting with him, cribbing to him, when I asked him, why did you do this to me? And he said, listen, the reason I got a completely non-science and soap selling girl to handle this high science is because I realized that we need to humanize it, right? We need to look at it from a very different lens from what we have. And it just worked, right? So I think I've been blessed to have worked with teams, where I had seniors who were veterans in this industry. I was blessed to interact with some of the doctors, some of the top specialists who were, patient enough to answer my stupid questions and teach me about it from a very patient perspective and a human perspective. So honestly, the only diversity I don't accept is ego. Everything else will only add value.
And the other thing I've realized is that conflict often creates the best ideas, because it really pushes you to explore new spaces. It pushes you to get into areas that have not been done before. And in our industry, both in pharma and consumer marketing, there's just so much clutter. Doctors are meeting like 30, 40 medical reps a day in some cases. and you're trying, and each medical rep is, throwing 3 or 4 or 5 brands at the doctor. Just standing out from the clutter is important, and that starts at the, at the brainstorming session when you're kind of deciding how much you want to push yourself, and diversity really helps you do that.
Absolutely.
It can be madness sometimes. There can be fights and tiffs, but the magic that happens out of it is really, really fun.
For us, for example, the whole AI adoption, right? Because of course, it's been a buzzword, and machine learning and AI, and in different shapes and forms, I think they've been around us for a while now. But the adoption inertia is so high in the late millennials or whatever, the early millennials, but 1980s, early 1980s, and the baby boomers versus the millennials of the 90s and then Gen Zs, etc. So when they came in and the team, suddenly the whole adoption went up. For me, I think that was very, very cool. And now when I sit with my daughter who's 13, and I'm able to at least match some of the tools that she is using at school, or it's quite cool. I mean, I love that fact.
Yeah, that makes so much sense, and therefore just using that to come back to what you've been doing in your careers. You've worked on biologics and categories that are therefore very central to the doctor's prescription, and then you've worked on categories like nutrition and pain that we very often say as pharma marketing folks that, hey, the doctor's not really interested in this category, it's not a clinical category or a scientific category. How have you maneuvered that is something that I'm sure everyone out there wants to learn from you.
So I think it's been exciting and challenging in equal parts, and obviously we've partnered with Vobron on that, and it's been very, very learning. I think a couple of fundamentals that have worked for me always. I think one is remembering that, or reminding ourselves that yes, these categories are not exciting for them anymore because maybe the science is not new, but that doesn't mean that these categories are not important to their patient treatment outcomes, right? So one is, first we need to remind ourselves that a painkiller, as banal as it can be, as jaded it can be, the fact is that relief from the pain is the first proof of the fact that the doctor's treatment is working for the consumer, right? That's the first moment of truth, right? I've been to a doctor for a pain or whatever symptom may be, right? The first thing I seek is relief from pain, relief from fever, relief from whatever was bothering me, right? Diarrhea, right? And therefore, no matter how banal these brands and categories are, they are the first moment of truth for that doctor, right? And therefore, reminding them about it always works. Always works is that, doctor, listen, this is your first moment of truth, right? So let's let's really go for a brand that you trust. The very fact that you said very rightly that, doctors are not interested. If they're not interested and they're not going to think too much, then all the more the reason to be top of mind for them, right? If you're the top of mind brand for them when it comes to writing painkiller, they are going to write, because exactly as you said, right? They're not going to think too much about it, right? I think last but not the least, let's not forget that doctors are also humans, right? If overall at consumer level we're struggling with a 6-second attention of humans, then why shouldn't that learning also be applied to the HCPs? And it sounds very trivial and gimmicky when I say this, but some of our campaigns came from actually just this insight. You remember we did this whole beehive wax thing for Vobron. Vobron was a brand that doctors studied when they were in med school. It was a textbook brand, right? The minute the rep started detailing, the doctor would say, oh please, yeah, come on, don't teach me Vobron, right? But then we worked together on actually bringing alive that whole beehive, which showed that how the drug was released in periodic doses through 24 hours. It just got their attention. Just last month, my teams launched another sort of 40-year-old product, and we wanted to, again, a boring category of pain and fever, but this time we used some caricatures. We also, in our first launch call or a relaunch call, we actually created the whole aura of orange fragrance, and because we could not get the doctor to taste the product, it's obviously a prescription product. we replicated the taste in form of a fragrance, and that just created an aha in the room, because suddenly in a boring day, we got this whole orange fragrance thing, and the doctor looked at it saying, where's the fragrance coming from? And we said, we wanted to remind you this is how good the product tastes. So I think just doing these little moments and not forgetting that we are important for the doctor, but use the same fundamentals to get his attention.
And just the thought that kind of comes from there is that very often also we talk about building services, purpose-based communication, so that the brands connect a little bit more with the doctor. Have you all had experiences with that? How have you used that, if ever?
No, of course, and I think Aditi can speak a lot more about it. I think for me, again, as I said, the principles remain the same, right? If you are an honest brand, if you're a genuine brand, right, especially in our context, right, in India, where therapy after therapy, disease after disease, you will see that diagnosis rates remain poor, treatment rates remain poor, right? You'll be surprised to see how much are even the healthcare community wanting to change that, not for profit but genuinely, right? It feels good when you are able to make sure that a person who deserves the treatment actually gets diagnosed, actually gets treated, and feels good after it. So I think in healthcare, more than any other industry, I have personally seen a huge role all of us can play beyond just brands, and definitely it has to be beyond brands, right? But we owe it to our country, our people where we work for, that more and more people are aware of their diseases. They get diagnosed, they get treated. Which brand, which company doesn't really matter. But trust me, Praful, the little that we've done in this space, the joy you get is far, far more higher than the joy we get every time we gain share or grow in revenue. But Aditi would have worked far more on this.
Absolutely, and one of the things I've often realized is that the biggest challenges in healthcare right now in the country are actually solved by communication and behavior change, both at the doctor and the consumer or the patient level. Versus just a solution, and that's where all of us kick it. So this is the perfect timing for to segue into the last question for you, which is in terms of, and you've touched upon this before, in terms of patient comms versus doctor comms. But your team is one that has literally built categories and brands that are the biggest in the country, basis patient comms in pharma marketing. Tell us more.
Absolutely, and I think I count myself as really, really lucky to be at the right place at the right time with, of course, Vaishali and her vision. So Praful, actually typically, and Nupur spoke about talent, her having to pitch pharma marketing to talent. One of the reasons that over the years I've seen is people want to show ROI and having that on the CV, that this campaign led to this much sale. Of course, it's easier done in FMCG and e-commerce, but for pharma in this whole regulated market, I would say it's more challenging. The creativity is not dumbing down, it's more challenging. And first things first is that it's not transactional. What teams our team has been able to do, I think, is for the leadership to understand, not only in India but at the regional level, global level, that we are here for the long haul. We need programs that are sustainable because we are actually strengthening the healthcare ecosystem. Given that most of our drugs are first in class or best in class, right? So most of the disease areas are new. People are not aware about those. So there the whole sensitization is done where teams come together. It's not just the marketing and the comms team. The access team, which has payers as their TG, right? The public affairs team, who has government as their TG. Medical, who does all the pre-launch priming and ecosystem creation. Marketing and comms. Comms works with patient organizations, with various stakeholders, builds that trust. And I think that has led to a lot of these categories, whether it is, with the Beat Heart Failure campaign, or the Beat Bad Cholesterol campaign that we are currently running. So I think, yeah, I mean, that is what is important. Also, what Nupur spoke about really resonates with me, the intent. It's not always about, of course, sales are important. Everyone is here for profits, is understandable. But when you are actually able to make a difference in patient communities, and when you are able to talk to, for breast cancer, I'll give you an example that, you know, we actually went and we spoke to a lot of breast cancer warriors who moved the narrative from breast cancer being an illness, very, very scary, to resilience and hope. Because when they shared their story actually did not speak of somebody who's weak or who's really suffering. It all came about of how they fought, how they continue to fight, and therefore the hope and resilience is what really is my why.
Nice. No, thanks, Aditi. Thanks, Nupur. This has been one of the sharpest conversations we've had on this table. I didn't have my pen with me or I'd be taking copious notes. But hope you folks have been taking notes. Thanks again for joining us today.
Thank you so much for this opportunity, Praful and Manifest. So all the best to you.
Thank you, Praful. Thank you, Manifest, for this opportunity.
Thank you.